So I'm here with a very interesting gentleman today. He's the CEO for Lead for Ghana. Want to introduce us or?
Yeah,
Oh,
sure. Yeah, I'm the CEO for Lead for Ghana, and also the CEO of Lead for Africa, which is the parent company of Lead for Ghana, um, as well. And yeah, we've been doing this for about a decade now. So technically, yeah, for about a decade now, and it's been exciting so far.
okay. So what exactly is Lead for Ghana?
So Lead for Ghana is a leadership development organization and a network organization. What the vision of the organization is to be able to help build a country where um, any child from anywhere, once you walk into a classroom, you should have the best possible education because we believe that education is a silver bullet solution to all societal problems. What I mean by that is if you're a child and you walk into a classroom in Tamale, for instance, in the northern region, the quality of education you receive should be equal to the quality of education a child walk into any school in Accra. So that your geographical location is not determining the kind of education you receive. You don't have to move places to get the kind of
Okay.
education that you receive. So that is the vision of the organization. How we intend to achieve that is to ensure that the leadership of the country values education, they understand the educational system really well, so that the policies they make actually puts education at the forefront. So then we recruit young professionals and recent university graduates, people we think that tomorrow will probably become ministers of state, presidents, CEOs of companies. We run them through our leadership program, but they're required to go and stay in a village for 2 years and serve as full-time teachers and community leaders. Because when they're serving as full-time teachers, they get to understand the challenges within the educational system, what needs to change, what needs to remain, the challenge that kids go through, parents go through, even the community members go through. And then after the 2 years, we induct them into the network part of
Okay.
the program and then help them get into leadership positions. So the decisions they make as leaders of the country will come from experience because they've been in the classroom before and they understand the educational system. So in a nutshell, that's what Lead for Ghana is trying to do.
Okay. So here's the thing. I know you personally, and you didn't start out with a background in education.
Yeah,
You started in engineering.
yeah.
So how do you get from being an engineer into running an education-based business?
Great question. I think it's a person. It's. I think this comes from my personal journey, right? When I was relatively young, let me put this: that my dad was one of those lucky people that when Kwame Nkrumah was trying to send people out of Ghana to go and learn what is happening in the U.S. and the Soviet Union, now Russia. So my dad was one of those lucky people that got out of the country, Nkrumah's scholarship. So he ended up in the Soviet Union, which is current day Russia, and studied there, came back to the country, and he was posted to the northern part to help develop the agricultural sector because
Okay.
he focused, he's an agronomist. So by default, he took his kids. So I was very young, and we ended up in the northern region. Um, my parents, being like strong believers in education, wanted to put us in some of the best schools. So they put us in a school called St. Paul's and St. Gabriel's. Um, these schools had very minimal, what does that call it, infrastructure. My teachers barely showed up. We were about 50 students in a classroom. We didn't have that much textbooks to write with. Long story short, my mom decided, look, there's no way my kids are going to get the kind of education I want them to get. So we needed to move to Accra.
Okay.
Ended up in Achimota school, then I went to the States and studied. So I always had an understanding that your geographical location determined the kind of education you received. Because if I had stayed in the north, I think my life trajectory would have been totally different from what my life trajectory is today. So got into school, studied, became a biomedical engineer, worked in a pharmaceutical company for a couple of years. And when I was working in the pharmaceutical company and also just living in America, something interesting was happening as a young person. I noticed that China was becoming a superpower. India was becoming a superpower. And there was also this a social construct. The way Chinese were being treated, the way Indians were being treated was a bit different from how Africans were being treated. So I figured out, look, I needed to find a way of helping build a continent or a country where if you come from Africa or come from Ghana, you're still treated with a certain level of dignity and respect. And the only way I thought I could do that was through education. So yeah, went to my boss's office, quit my job, and bought a one-way ticket to Ghana, and here we are.
So before, did you have any plans written down? I mean, how do you go from fundraising to start a business, building partnerships?
Yeah. Um, it, Good question. I think first I started with the idea. What was
Okay.
the vision? The vision was, okay, how do we make sure that another Daniel does not have to leave the northern part of Ghana to come to Accra to get an education? That the next generation of Daniels at that age should be able to stay in the northern region, stay in the Volta region, western region, eastern region, and get the best possible education that they can receive. That was the vision. Then I think from there you start asking yourself, okay, how do I get this done, right? So I did a feasibility study, try to understand the educational system. Yes, wrote a business plan. By the way, I have three other co-founders. So
Okay.
when this was happening, it was not just one person.
You were talking to them.
It was a collective of friends who were all based in the US, come from the equal backgrounds, so we understood what we were trying to do. And if I have to take this a little bit back before I even answer your question, I think what happened to was one of my co-founders was at MIT at that time, and on vacations I'll go to Boston, go visit friends. I mean, it was like a Ghanaian community in the United States, everyone going to school and stuff like that. I remember there was a time he got an internship with Intel, and he was
Okay.
posted to Poughkeepsie, which is I think the northern part of New York. So I went to Poughkeepsie, and on our way from when we got to Poughkeepsie, we were like, you know what, let's go to New York City and just go and have fun. I mean, you're first year in university, second year in university. On our way to New York, he started telling me how he wrote an essay just to build a library in Kumasi. It was just an essay about it. The teacher just said if he had some funding, what would he use it for? So he was just writing for what he thought he was going to use the funds for. Apparently, his professor fell in love with the essay
Oh.
and said, look, if you really want to do this, I could help you do it. I could connect you to organizations that could get this done. So long story short, he built I think a 7,000 book capacity library.
So that's when Lead for Ghana started.
Yeah, but I mean, even before then, at this point, Lead for Ghana was not even born. The idea was not even formulated. Think about this is like maybe 6 years before Lead for Ghana.
Okay.
Right. But the reason I'm sharing this story too is because that conversation kind of inspired me, because this was someone that I've gone to the same high school with, and growing up in Gambia, always had this notion that to be able to do anything, building the library, you had to be old and rich, and when you had disposable income, that's when you can actually do things to help community. And I always had it in me to do something to impact community anyways. But that inspired me because when I went back to my university campus, the very first thing I did was I went to my the head of the president of the university, and told him, like, look, I want to build a library in my home country called Ghana.
Mention the name of the university. just for record keeping purposes. What university was it?
So first, this was Acadia University.
Okay.
So I went to the president. I said, hey, I want to build a library in Ghana. He was like, okay, no problem. So then I reached out to my friend in MIT and was like, how did you get the organizations to get this library going? So he talked about Books for Africa. So I contacted Books for Africa and I said, I want to ship 30,000 books to Ghana. So came to Ghana, met the member of parliament for the community that I was trying to build the library with. And together we raised 250,000 USD. So built the library, shipped the 30,000 books, and there, everything was done. Library was commissioned. Great job, done. 2 years later, I'm done with undergrad. I started doing my, then I started getting into biomedical engineering because the undergrad I did physics, chemistry, and economics. And then started doing biomedical engineering at Cornell. Then came back to Ghana to check in on the library. I get to Ghana and the books are well arranged. It's so clean, so neat. It's almost like no one is touching touching the books. And that agitated me. That got me angry. Because when I asked the librarian, why are the books so cleanly and neatly arranged, his response with the kids were going to spoil the books and they didn't want to give it to the kids to take home, and that's why they were keeping the books and so forth. And I told him, I don't care if they take it home and they pour soup on it, it doesn't matter. The point of all this, the resources, is for them to actually read. But it also dawned on me that building libraries across Ghana is not what is going to solve the problem. You can build as many libraries as well. If the mindset is not correct, if people don't actually see the use of it, then the library is never going to be utilized.
Okay.
Right. So these little things were planting ideas in my head. So it got to me that, okay, if you wanted to shift education, you had to shift it at a systemic level. Right.
You go straight to the root of the problem.
Get to the root of the problem. And I think, and that's where Lead for Ghana was born. So when the Lead for Ghana idea came, the first person I called was my friend who had built the 7,000, but his name is Sadiq, by the way. So I called Sadiq and I said, hey, look, this idea I have, and this is what I think I wanted to do for the country. And then my other co-founders were also on board. One is called Abdul and one is called Carolina. Abdul's case was interesting because during undergrad, after undergrad, he went to do something called Teach for America. And what Teach for America was doing back in those days was they found the smartest university graduates, they train them, and then they take them to go and work in the difficult communities. In America, they call them the ghettos. They take them to go and teach over there. And then once they're done with their teaching and whatsoever, they get them to go to the White House, Goldman Sachs. So they build this network around them, and then they help them change the educational system. And I thought to myself, oh my God, this idea is brilliant. Like, if there's any country or continent that needs this, it definitely has to be, Ghana. So that's how he also got on board with Lead for Ghana. And then later on, we had another friend called Carolina who also joined because she was studying education at NYU at the time. So she had an in-depth knowledge about education, curriculum development, and so forth. So the group of 4 young people decided, okay, look, let's take the bull by its horn and try and do something incredible. And Lead for Ghana was born.
Earlier you mentioned about how you went one day, quit your job, and then dove head into starting this business.
Yeah.
Is this something you would advise people to do, to quit your job cold turkey? Or looking back, do you wish you had done it more gradually?
No. I think if I had calculated too much, I probably would have not done it. Because think about the context too, right? This is a young person, good job, you're working on, America. That's what a lot of young people would probably do today. They want to leave the country, they want to get a well-paying job and things like that. So for me to have left was unconventional because that's not a pathway that people would take. But I think I had such a strong commitment to the idea. It was like you found something in which you're like, this has to happen no matter what. So I had that conviction. So I told myself, look, I needed to move back and I needed to do it now. It's not something I can postpone. Worst case scenario, I think at that point I was maybe 26, 27 years old. Worst case scenario, if it doesn't work out, I can always bounce back. And that's the advice I give to young people. If you're young, the universe is more forgiving of your mistakes and you have time to course correct. But if you wait too long to start a business or to start a venture, the universe may not be that much forgiving because at that point, kids are involved, wives are involved, the other people involved in your life that you can't just get up. So the risk becomes much higher. So the earlier you do it, the better. The other thing too is I also thought of it as sailing a ship, right, and going to war. If you sail a ship and you get to the shores and you have to win that war, it's basically like burning those ships, right? Because then you have no way getting back. The only way you can survive is to win that war. So to me, quitting my job and taking that one-way flight to Ghana was basically saying this has to work, no matter what.
So you put all your eggs in one basket.
Pretty much, I put my energy, my time. To me, it had to work. So whatever it would take for you to get this off the ground, you have to get it off the ground.
Was it instant success?
No, I wish. I mean, 2 or 3 years in, I was just asking myself, like, should I just leave? Like, it was tough. It was tough. And I think it also got me to understand one of the biggest challenges young people have in this country, because I face it myself. It's ageism. In this country, young people are not given the opportunity to do anything just for the mere fact that you are young.
Even in this country, the thing is, people consider young as anybody below 50. And that in itself is very problematic.
It is problem. You're right. I had a friend who recently invited me to a youth service. And I looked at her and I was like, you know, I'm 38, right? Youth ends at 35. So go and look for your other friends who are below 35 to go to that youth service. I have no business there. But you're right. If you're defining young or youth as people below 50, then the way you're viewed, it's skewed. But ageism was one of the big things. It was, you have this grand, big idea. You're so young. Why are you rushing? Take your time. When you go older, you can do, X, Y, Z. So most of my meetings were, oh, young man, you have a beautiful idea. Kudos to you. That was it. Wait small, you're rushing too much. Go and do something else. That was majority of my meetings ended that way. However, there are also individuals in the system who have a different mindset, and they focus merely on the idea. And if you're able to communicate your idea clearly to them, it becomes very powerful. When I was moving back to Ghana, this person became the Speaker of Parliament.
Oh, I see.
Right. So that became the power of network. Yes. So when I was hitting a roadblock at the Ministry of Education and stuff like that, I just went back to him and I said, look, this is the idea that I have. This is the plan that I have for the country. And if I'm struggling to get meetings with the right people. But because he had done a project with me and he knows how serious and convicted I am, he didn't look at my age as the barrier. He just saw a capable, talented young person that needed support. So he called, I believe, the chairman of the Parliamentary Committee on Education and said, wherever this guy needs to go, as far as government institutions are concerned, make sure he gets there. So that became the first step of actually getting access to government, opening government doors. But even those, I'll go to the meeting by myself and they'll still look at me as young man, you're rushing, whatsoever. So what I did was I actually went to the meetings with him. And I'll tell him what I wanted to get out of the meeting, what I wanted him to say, how he should say it, and I'll just sit down. So he introduced me, all right, but I'll just be there as a spectator. He will communicate and say everything to them, get whatever we need to sign. So the next time when I follow up at the meeting, you saw me come with somebody.
Yeah, so now your respect.
Exactly. And basically, that is how I was able to overcome the ageism thing until you get to a point where people now see you as, okay, I now have to take this young man seriously. He's not just somebody who is throwing his weight about as well. So that was very helpful. Just building the right level of networks as you're growing, because technically your network is basically your net worth as well.
That's true.
Yeah.
So it looks like it wasn't smooth sailing success from the beginning.
No.
So what are some key lessons you've learned from failure? And a two-set question.
Mm-hmm.
What are some key lessons you've learned from failure? And what would you tell others on their journey where they face several setbacks?
Yeah.
Maybe 3, 4, 5 years in, and they're starting to feel like, you know what? This was a wrong idea.
Mm-hmm.
I was too audacious.
Mm-hmm.
Go back to living a comfortable life.
Yeah. I would say focus on the war, not the battle. You're definitely going to lose a few battles here and there. So your battles are your failure, but focus on the war. And what I mean is have a North Star, have a vision, and the vision has to be crystal clear. And see failure as more as speed bumps. You know, you're speeding, you reach a speed ramp, you slow down, you overcome it, and then you keep moving. And you also learn a lot from failure or setbacks. Let me call it setbacks per se, because that's where growth happens. And I can give certain examples. So Lead for Ghana started, and we said we were going to recruit the best and brightest young university graduates in this country and convince them to go and live in villages. I remember I was in a board meeting of MTN, and I was pitching this idea to them because I wanted MTN to support us. And they said, again, brilliant idea, we see the concept. But there was one lady in the boardroom who said, you're going to convince who? Young Ghanaians here in this country, the smartest one, to go and live where? In the village. And to do what? To teach. First of all, nobody wants to go into teaching because they even respect the teaching profession. Two, you want to take them into village. These are people that when you go to the national service and you even post them to some place, they will do whatever it takes, call who they need to call, pull all their networks so they will be posted in Accra. So from the get-go, they saw those challenges. And to me, I acknowledge the challenge as well, that it's not going to be easy. But we're surprised though, when we started doing our recruitment on Ashesi University, Legon, and stuff like that, I noticed that Lead for Ghana was the only organization that was actively recruiting people to get back into the rural communities to increase academic outcomes. What I learned from that experience is, it's not that young people didn't want to go into these places, it's that nobody really gave them the platform to do so. And because no one gave them the platform, we just assumed that's not what they wanted to do, right? So that was one of the lessons for me. The other thing too is just have strong conviction. I remember I traveled from Accra to the the Volta region, because that was the very first region we were trying to start the program. I got there. The regional director of education then looked at the MOU. He said, there are some things that he doesn't feel comfortable signing. I have spoken to this guy on the phone several times. I sent him the MOU ahead of time so he can read through it so I can make any correction before I travel all the way to the Volta region. Basically, I called them. The guy said he's not going to sign the MOU after I've done. And I actually realized that when I actually got to the office, that's when I noticed that he had not even opened the email. I mean, you can tell he had not. So the first time he was seeing the MOU was when it was actually in his hands.
To me, that's not surprising because we live in a country where you send an email, and you have to send a follow-up text.
I've sent you
an email. It can be so annoying sometimes.
It can be. But he didn't, so I had to come all the way back to work. I mean, that action alone can just demoralize somebody, right? But I mean, I didn't give up. I took it in good faith, made the changes that I had to make, and went back there and got him to sign the MOU. There were a lot of people who said no in terms of funding. Funding was very difficult. Like local funding was just impossible to come by. For every 15 people that I reached out to, I'll probably say maybe 13 or 14 said no. So if you're not someone who is used to hearing no, you can also get quite depressed. Because if a critical mass of people constantly are saying no to you, it can be quite depressing and also quite discouraging. So I guess those were the moments where I was just thinking, maybe I should. I mean, if the country is not ready for this, then maybe you shouldn't do it. But I kept reminding myself of being young and like, how many children do we have in this country who are incredibly smart, incredibly talented, but their future will never ever be bright just because of their geographical location. And if I can push through, then even if it is just 5 people, I will have changed the life trajectory of these young people. I don't know them, they don't know me, but this action, I know without a doubt that it will change their lives for the better, for them, their community, and the country as a whole. So that just kept me going. It really kept me going. And I also think it was also because I was relatively young. I think if I was this age today, or even probably in my 40s, I don't think I would have put in so much energy into it as much as I did in my 20s.
You spoke about funding. I've realized that it's challenging to raise funding in Ghana. And sometimes it's even easier to look outside a country and raise a funding. You find out that most people who don't live in a country with you would jump on board much more quickly than those who live in a country with you. And then after they come on board, now your country people, after seeing that other people have bought into your idea, now they start throwing
Yeah.
their books at you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was it the same for you?
It is the same, but the truth is, man, even after you've raised your funding internationally, even the local funding is still tough.
It's still tough.
If I tell today, I could probably tell, like, Lead for Ghana is funding base. Probably 90% of it is foreign direct investment. I'll probably say we're probably one of the very few organizations that actually invest a lot of money into the country. So everything that you see around is money generated either from somewhere Toronto or New York or London. It's coming from foreign countries, not necessarily in Ghana. Aside from all the impacts we see and stuff like that, it's still
Why do
that.
you think that's the case, though?
It's risk capital, right? In a country for like the US, the risk capital is huge. What I mean by risk capital is they have enough money to say, I can take a risk on this idea. And if it doesn't work, great. It doesn't matter, right? And they have the ability to say, maybe I'll invest in 12 companies and 2 of them will succeed. But the return on investment on those 2 will be so large that they don't even see the effect on the 10 that failed. We don't have that much risk capital in Ghana. So people are not really taking risk on ideas. And that's what also affects our private economy. That's why you don't see a lot of businesses springing up.
It's I mean, in my professional work, I've tried raising funding for some people I've worked with. It's like pulling skin from tooth.
Oh yeah,
it's very, very difficult.
It is,
if possible.
Yeah. The other thing too is fundraising is about research and storytelling and conviction. Those are those 3 things. So you have to be a good storyteller. And you have to be convicted, because before someone gives you funds to do anything, they need to believe in you, right? They need to believe in you. They need to understand your why. They need to know who is in front of me and why do they want to do what you're doing. And they need to get tick. You have to tick the person. They have to feel inspired. The only way you can do that is research. You need to know everything about the person that you're going to pitch your idea to, from the schools they went to, the soccer team they like, the sports they play, and whatsoever. So no matter when I walk into a meeting that I'm going to raise funds, I always begin with something that I think is going to grab the person's attention. Either, I noticed that you went to Achimota school. I'll start from there. When you're in Achimota school, which house were you in? Right? I was in Jibek. Maybe I was in Agri House. I've broken an ice. We can bond over that. So if the person likes Manchester, for instance, I would start with, a story around it that, basically it's finding something that makes the individual taken and trying to raise funds from that. But to answer your question, it's incredibly difficult. It's incredibly difficult because we don't have the risk capital. It's also incredibly difficult because sometimes people just don't care, to be honest. They just really don't care. And if they don't care, they're not going to put their money where they just don't feel a connection to it. But that needs to shift, and it needs to shift very quickly.
If you were doing this all over again, would you look first towards raising funds here, or you go directly outside?
I'll go directly outside.
And that's what you'd advise people to?
Yeah. Look, here's the thing, right? If you have a great idea, does it matter where the money is coming from, whether it's local or international? Not really, right? Your job is, how do I fund this idea to see the results of it? But you need to think about sustainability. The reason local funding helps is from the idea of sustainability. That if that foreign organization decides not to fund you again, the people that are direct beneficiaries of your impact should be the ones that sustain it. Because if they are not on board, then if your foreign funders stop funding you, then everything just comes to a halt. But this also becomes important because with fundraising, your stages with companies, your startup, the people who are going to give you money are basically your friends and parents and people that know you, right? When you move from the startup phase and you're moving to the next stage, it becomes corporations and stuff, and then foundations come on board. At the second and third stage, people want to know if the people that you are impacting are actually contributing as well. Like they want to know the skin in the game from the country, and that's where local funding becomes really, really important. Because if you can demonstrate to them that, oh, you know what, there are local players that support what I'm doing, then they have more trust in terms of making sure that international funds come to you. So for scale, you definitely need some local funding to do so.
So what year was it that Lead for Africa, as a business entity, started operations?
So, Lead for Africa came out of Lead for Ghana. I think this was 2 years ago.
Okay.
So I thought to myself, again, remember the reason I moved back to Ghana and Africa more broadly was because I wanted to help make sure everyone that was coming out of the continent was being treated with the same respect and dignity as our colleagues from China and India and stuff like that. But Ghana was always the litmus test. If it works in Ghana, then you can work anywhere else. But I'm also quite crazy with my goals and my ambitions, right? So I thought, wouldn't it be amazing if in the next 25 to 30 years, if we could get 5 people from the Lead for Africa network to be presidents of their countries at the exact same time? So imagine the president of Ghana, Nigeria, South Africa, Uganda, and Kenya or something, or Rwanda, are all Lead for Africa alumni. They've all been through the educational system. They've all known each other since they were young, and now they are there. They have one mission, one vision. You can literally transform 5 countries at the exact same time. And if you can transform 5 countries in Africa, by default, you can transform the entire continent of Africa. Because what Ghana does, Nigeria just does the exact same thing on a larger scale. Where Ghana moves, all our neighbors move along as well. Where South Africa moves, Botswana, Namibia, Mozambique, they all do the exact same thing. So if you can strategically plant people to be leaders of these countries on the continent, then by default you can change educational policies everywhere. So that's the driving force behind Lead for Africa.
Okay. So what's your staff strength, if you don't mind me asking?
So
There's a reason why I'm asking.
Yeah, okay. So the back end staff is about 23. If I combine the fellows and the staff, is about probably above 300.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you say front of 300 people?
Yeah.
How do you ensure that a strong organizational culture happens?
Good question. I think it's it's just constant engagement, clarity of vision, clarity on mission, and also how you're recruiting people, right? So everybody understands the vision of Lead for Ghana. There's no doubt about it. Everybody understands the mission of Lead for Ghana. There's no doubt, from the board members all the way to even students in the classroom know exactly why we are in the classroom. The thing to becomes, how do we recruit people? We recruit people against the culture of the organization. So if you come for an interview, for instance, we are looking at things like, okay, is this someone who really actually believes that the vision of the organization can be achieved? Is there a sense of commitment over there? Is this someone who has a sense of responsibility? Is this someone who believes that simplicity is important in the everyday work that we do? For the fellows, we look for commitment, because you know you're going to live in an underserved community. If you don't have commitment, you leave. After staying there for a couple of months, you will just get out of the program, right? So we look out for certain competencies that we think is going to help you actually be successful within the organization in the long term. And then we hire against that. And then make sure that we have the environment, the tools, the resources to kind of like feed into that culture. But the culture is such a way that it weaves people out and it weaves people in. Like if you come in and you are not delivering at the level that you need to deliver, hardly would anyone even fire you. You would just resign yourself. You will feel it. The culture just weave you out naturally.
Okay. Do you have any particular challenges when it comes to organizational leadership? You being the CEO.
Yeah, I think Ghana has a big challenge when it comes to talent. No, it's true.
What do you mean?
Lead for Ghana is at a very advantage.
of talent, or
Yes, there is scarcity of talent, right, compared to other countries, like even as some of other countries that you find in Africa. Lead for Ghana is at a very advantage position because we have a lot of data on young people. We know the schools they are coming from. If we are recruiting 300 people, we'll probably get like 4,000 applications. So we can tell the essays like first class graduates are writing, and so you can tell the educational competency level of the young people in this country. And it's not that, it's, to be honest, it's nothing to be proud of as a Ghanaian. Like it's really nothing to be proud of. So finding the right people becomes incredibly tough. So a position could be open for like a good 3-4 months and you just can't fill the position because you just can't hire anybody too. So you have to be very careful about who you hire, recommendations here and there, and so forth. The other thing about organizational leadership, I think externally, is also policy and government shifts. If there's a change in government, all the relationships you've built with ministers and stuff, they've changed. New people are coming in. So you have to literally go back to the drawing board and try and rebuild these connections all over again.
really, is it just in your line of work where relationships are key? Because when it comes to impact invested, I find out that that's everything. Because is way different from profit venture making purposes.
Yeah.
Where input, output,
Yeah.
shareholder maximization. Let's
Yeah.
take our dividends. Share.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah. No, the relationships are key. Like, if you look at the core program of Lead for Ghana, for instance, basically what we're doing, we're taking young people and training them to become leaders. Not just leaders, but also entrepreneurs, right? So there's one key element in our curriculum which says motivating and influencing people to take desired actions. You can't do that without having a very, very strong relationship with people. Like, you need to know what is making people connect, what is inspiring them, why they do what they do. You need to connect at a certain level for them to say, okay, I want to support this person, or I want to help this person and help, or not help this person. So relationships are very important. And then in relationships too, it also comes down to communication. Like, how do you even communicate with people? Some people don't like phone calls. They prefer you just WhatsApping them, right? Just understanding that alone is it's key. Some people prefer in-person meetings. So if you meet them in person, you literally need to tell them exactly what you want from them, get them to do what you want them to do. Because once you leave that meeting, if you're following via emails, and they're not going to mind you, right? So being able to build a very strong relationship is incredibly important, but also understanding the person that you're working with. What motivates them, what increases their willpower as well.
I think there's this gentleman I follow. He used to work in Silicon Valley. So there was a show he was on, and people were asking him about networking and what is important and everything. He was like, his advice is build something great, and then the network will come by itself.
Yeah, that's very rich to say.
He was coming from the place where
people gravitate towards the products.
exactly. Sometimes networking makes you look desperate or needy.
I
But
think
if you start with the end in mind,
Yeah.
build something great, your network automatically
yeah,
emerges.
I think people, it also depends on how people approach networking, right? Normally, when people approach networking, what do you think they do? So let's assume someone goes to a conference, right? What do you think they do? Everybody goes with business cards and stuff, and then they meet somebody who's like, "Oh, hi, my name is so and so. This is my card," and
That's where the desperation comes.
it never works.
It never works. Yeah.
It really never works. You and I know when people leave those conferences, they're not sitting there looking at the number of cards and then sending email. It really, and some, they don't even remember you because they've met so many people. The approach to networking is to ask yourself, what can I do for this person? Not what can I get from this person, right? So if I meet somebody that I really want to build a relationship with and I've done my research, first of all, before I even get to that conference, I probably know who is coming to that conference, who is going to speak. I've done my research, the schools they've gone into, what motivates them, why they're doing the things they're doing, the companies they run, and so forth. So if I strike a conversation with you, I'm striking it from a place of knowledge, right? I know certain backgrounds, and I'll start a conversation with that. But most importantly, I would tell you one or two things that I think you need that I can be useful to you for. And I know you remember me for that one because you know it's something that's going to help you.
Yes.
Right? So when I'm following up, I'm following up because we had this conversation. I said I was going to do XYZ and this is my time. Can we get on a call to talk about how I can support you? You're more likely to respond to that email versus, oh, we met so and so and so. Hi, can I get your time? Get my time for what? I don't know. Right. So people need to switch their mindset on what they do with networking. It should always come from a place of how can I support? Because the moment you do that, absolutely, the moment the person know you can be useful to them, they want you within their circle. And once you do that, one way or the other, they're going to reciprocate. They're going to reciprocate their favor or action or whatsoever. And those networks are actually much more stronger than anything else. So my story of meeting the member of parliament that I built the library with, I went to him and said, this is what I want to do for your community, right? I've spoken to this organization, that organization want to bring libraries, XYZ. If we build this, I mean, this will increase your profile. When that happened, that became a network. When he became Speaker of Parliament, of course, I can just walk into his office and talk to him. Because when I first met him, I didn't go like how everybody goes. Or member of parliament said, this is my business card, or my cousin needs some school fees, or help me. It wasn't that. It was more like, what can I do for you? And that's how the relationship is built.
I mean, if we approach it from that perspective, then it changes everything. Because then you put your value first. And that's something I've learned also in life and in doing business.
Mm-hmm.
Go with everything is value based, and people pay for value, not necessarily for only the product. And value is subjective. It might be valuable to one person, and it might not be valuable to others. So you need to know, like you said, who exactly it is that you're dealing with.
Yeah. And if people find it difficult, just find out which companies that they're working for or running. If they're CEOs, just learn a little bit of that company. If you know a little bit of that company, you can always have a value proposition.
Getting data in Ghana is so difficult. Like I go on Glassdoor sometimes. And nobody's willing to disclose anything.
But there lies an opportunity too, right? If anyone should come up with a data company, they would literally be at the forefront of everything. Because we're moving into the world where data is everything. The reason I say that is AI is a big thing now. What is the food for AI? Data. Right. So if anyone can come up there and figure a way of literally just collecting data and, making it a very comprehensive data collection system, it's a bingo for them. But I agree with you. Getting information is hard. But that being said, you still have to find a way. You have to use different angles. LinkedIn, Office, websites, friends, networks, whatsoever. You just need to collect that information one way or the other.
It's our culture as Ghanaians. Growing up, you have to be seen, not heard. It's like people get into positions of power and they don't want to let society know that this is where I'm at. If you know, you know. If you don't, you don't. So it makes extracting data very, very difficult.
Yeah, for those people in positions of power, it's just a lack of leadership.
Yeah.
That's just what it is. It's unfortunate they even find themselves in those positions in the first place, because in any world they wouldn't. I'll agree with you on the culture part. If your culture is not naturally a data collecting culture by default, you won't know how to even seek it or even look for it, right? So take our classrooms, for instance. I think late last year, I went to India with a couple of some of my team members and a few other organizations across Africa. And it was sponsored by the Gates Foundation because they're one of our partners. So we got to India, and the whole idea of the visit was to see how the educational system was operating in India and how they were using technology and introducing technology into the classroom. And I was fascinated because the plan for Lead for Ghana moving forward is how do we make sure that every classroom in the country is technology driven, especially leveraging artificial intelligence, so our kids are not left behind. So I'm curious, let me see what India is doing that is so great that people are talking about and stuff. I get into the classroom, kids and stuff. I mean, before the technology even got into the classroom, when I inspected their books and the teacher manuals and stuff, it was very much data driven. And I'm like, this makes sense. Because if data collection is already part of your culture, when I introduce a tablet into your class, you don't see it as additional work. You see it as something that's easing work for you. But if you don't have that culture and I introduce something new, you're just going to see it as an additional work. Yeah. So when the government says I'm going to give one tablet per student to schools, some of the tablets have been distributed, but when you get to the school, they are not functioning. They've either been packed somewhere in some storage or it's not being used at all. Because to them, already the work they're doing, they probably see it's so daunting. Now you're going to ask them to add another layer to the work that they're already doing. No, it's not going to work out. You need to build the culture first. Then you can introduce the technology. And I told myself, this actually makes sense. For us to get technology into the classroom, first of all, we just need to let teachers understand why you need to collect attendance. I mean, you should know the number of students that are coming to your classroom day in, day out. Know the household that you're coming from. Is it a two-parent household or not? Where they are failing. If you take term 1, term 2, term 3, can I just follow a trend to see, okay, term 1, this kid got maybe 20% in English. Term 3, she got 60%. Term 2 probably got 45%. What is informing that? If those things are important to you and I come and tell you, oh, take this tablet, and this tablet will actually make things very easy because then you don't have to be going around counting. You can just input data, it analyzes the data for you and gives you a dashboard that you can use. You would welcome that idea, right? So going back to your question, I think we just need to help build a country where we value the collection of data, but we also understand how to use data. Until we get there, everything else that we are trying to do is just really not going to work.
We're really against collecting data because, like you said, we see it as additional labor instead of seeing it as a tool to inform policy making, to inform decision making, whatever. It's just a small fraction of people who realize that
it's important.
Fun fact, to a certain degree, there are people within the Ministry of Education that could not tell you the number of senior secondary schools we have in this country. This government. I mean, try and wrap your head around that. You're responsible for, let's say, government. Forget about private schools, just government schools.
After how many democracies?
I know. It's like me. It's like walking into a company, maybe even a small company, and the leadership of the company cannot even tell the number of employees they have.
Yeah.
Right? It says a lot. It says a lot, and it's because the data collection system is just not there. And the truth of the matter is, if you're making decisions that are not backed by data, you're just shooting blind. You're shooting blind because you're not shooting with a target in mind.
And also, these people are there just to satisfy the job opportunity. They're not there because there's some innate belief
in stuff. Yeah.
Let's call a spade a spade. They're just there for a paycheck month to month.
Yeah.
So they don't bother going the extra mile.
Yeah, I agree with you. But it comes down to recruitment, right? How do you hire people, recruit people who are not just there because talent, exactly. Who are not just there because at the end of the day they want their salaries paid, right? And I'll share this one secret with me in terms of recruiting people. I always ask individuals, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I generally ask because I really want to know, right? Or someone gives you 100,000 USD and tells you to do whatever you wanted to do. What would you do with that 100K? And your answer to me should tie into the job description that you're applying for at Lead for Ghana, in my mind. And I want you to, and I'm not telling you that, connected. I'm just asking a raw question. For instance, if you're in marketing, if you're in the media team, and you tell me in the next 5 years, I want to start my own, media agency, and I want to be known as one of the best videographers and whatsoever. Oh, great. Then I know that if I hire you for the media team and put you in a role where you are responsible for videography, it's not just a job for you. Because you already naturally see yourself doing that if someone had given you capital to do so. So everything you're just doing, even though you're doing it for the organization, it's also an opportunity for you to learn. So you're actually doing something you're already passionate about. You're just being paid to do so. So your outcomes is really higher than someone whose 5-year plan is, I probably want to go to law school, for instance, and I'm hiring you to do videography just because it's a hobby. Of course, you're not going to put in your energy and talent. Your time, your spare time, you're studying for your law school, right? But if I hire you into a counsel role for Lead for Ghana, yes, you're studying for law school, but you also get opportunity to read the contracts and partnership contracts between Lead for Ghana and another organization. It naturally fits within your 5-year plan. So if you're hiring people from that perspective, then you're hiring them based on their natural talent and their natural inspiration, as opposed to this person just needs, things are hard, they just need a job that would move the needle forward for them.
It comes to what you're saying just makes me think about character and skill. I believe skill can be taught. Character, no.
Yeah, well, character, if you can mold it, but I think when you get to a certain age, when you get to a certain age, it becomes hardwired to shift. It becomes quite difficult.
But you can learn a new skill at any point of your life.
You're right. I agree with you on that.
Character, no.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. That is why I really don't care about the older generation in Ghana. When I say this, people think I'm crazy, and why are you saying that? But it's true, I don't. If you're about 40 years old, I don't waste my time in trying to do anything. Because I genuinely believe that when you turn on your lights and the light doesn't come on, you turn on your tap and your water doesn't flow, forget about blaming Akufo-Addo or Mahama for that matter. It's the young people in this country that are blamed, because they determine who is president and who is not. Period. If young people today, between the ages of 25 and 40, let me just add a 40 group, decide that they wake up one day and say, we are all not going to work, we are not moving an inch, this country will shut down immediately. It would. Because if you take a phone call, so someone like, let me use our past Akufo-Addo, for instance, takes a phone call, he wants to do something. He doesn't have the strength, the power, the speed and agility to walk from one place to actually go and do the work. He needs to call somebody who also calls somebody. The end person that actually gets the job done all the time is some young person somewhere.
Of course.
If that young person decides not to do it, the president's directive is not being carried out.
Of course.
Right? So if young people band themselves and say, look, these are the things we want to see in our country probably in the next 15 to 10 years, and these are the actions that we want everyone else to take, we can transform this country. We can't blame our leadership for anything. I mean, even though we put them there.
I mean, what you're saying makes perfect sense. I've always wondered why, for any secular job, pension starts around 60, 65.
Yeah.
Why is it that the most important job in the country doesn't have the same cutoff point? I've always wondered. I'm like,
well, let me.
It's
interesting. Let me humor you, right? Yeah. So the Constitution is actually, first of all, the Constitution was written by people that were below the age of 40 years, young people, right? Two, the Constitution says you can only run for president if you're 40 years and above. So it has a downward limit, right? So you can't be president if you're, but it doesn't have an upper limit. So you can be 80, 90 years old and run for president. But for some reason, a 35 or 32-year-old strong individual.
Have a minimum and not a maximum?
It's interesting. I hope I'm allowed to say this, but I asked former President Kufuor this exact same question, because I was literally just interviewing him like this. He doesn't know. I don't think anyone has ever been able to really articulate. But I think for me, I think the reason behind it is probably, again, ages and stuff, right? If you're, at least when you're 40, you've lived life, you have some certain experience and stuff, and you can be. But look, there are some 32-year-old people in this country who have way more exposure, knowledge, and skill set than 60-year-olds in this country, right?
Granted.
But just because you've put a limit, that 32 or 33-year-old young man will never have the ability to occupy such a position,
Understood.
which makes no sense.
Yes. To me, it doesn't make sense. And like you said, most people I've asked this question to either don't know the answer or can't articulate it well enough.
Yeah.
Because if you're setting variables, there's always a minimum and then a maximum.
Yeah.
It's unbalanced when you set a minimum and then now the maximum is into perpetuity.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I think there should be an upper limit, maybe 75 and above. I think after 75 we shouldn't be allowed to.
You shouldn't be allowed to.
Yeah, I think after
Then that just
Yeah.
becomes what, geriatric.
yeah, after 75, go sit on some beach and find young people and mentor them. Like, yeah, or advise a young person as president. You have no business, being. Even 75 is pushing it.
75 is pushing it.
Yeah, because to
then
be
your
president-
earnings start to fail you.
Look,
It's a very onerous job, going from place to place.
any president that's above 60 or 65, I know they're not the one running their country. Because if you really, really, really want to run a country, there's no way you'll be sleeping. You wouldn't have I think the maximum amount of sleep you may probably have is maybe 5 hours or 6 hours.
If you're pushing it, because you and I were averaging four,
No, so,
4 hours of sleep.
See, that's why you need someone who is young,
5 year pushing.
strong, vibrant, and can take in those kind of pressure.
5 year pushing it. I know if I have a good night's sleep, maximum is 6 hours.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what I call a good night's sleep.
yeah.
And then I'm wearing this band that always tells me, oh, you need 8 hours
Of sleep
to
and
recover.
stuff.
Like,
Yeah, yeah,
listen, I can't afford
yeah.
8 hours of sleep as much as I would love.
Yeah, no, I share your thoughts on that. But luckily for us, our current president says they're going to put together a committee to review the entire constitution of Ghana. I hope one of the things that comes out of that constitutional review is if there's going to be a lower limit, there should be an upper limit to the presidency as well.
We'll leave it to the people who are in charge of public governance.
Time will tell.
We are into private enterprises.
Yeah.
All right. So, personally, one thing I would like to know, who are some of the people who inspire you? It doesn't necessarily have to be within the industry, just personally. What do you like? Who inspires you?
I would say one of the person who have really had a tremendous influence in my life is Steve Jobs, the late Steve Jobs. What a fascinating story, and what an amazing legacy. I don't think there's any book or interview that I haven't listened to or read. And I'll recommend it. I mean, his biography, just Steve Jobs, written by Walter Isaacson. Such a fascinating story. The risk, the exposure, the simplicity, the obsession to perfection and even excellence.
Obsession is everything for me, to the detriment of everybody else.
Yeah, it's so definitely Steve Jobs. I think within Africa, I would say Kofi Annan, with some reservations, but Kofi Annan, and also, of course, Kwame Nkrumah. Kofi Annan, the reason I say reservations is because I just didn't like the way he handled the Rwandan genocide. And I think he also said it himself at some point in his life. I think he could have done way better with how the UN dealt with the entire Rwandan genocide. But yeah, definitely Steve Jobs, Kofi Annan, Kwame Nkrumah, and my mom too. Yeah, definitely my mom. She's a powerhouse, and my dad is great, but my mom is just extraordinary.
All right. Kwame Nkrumah is remarkable because his ability. I'm all for future thinking, but this gentleman thought in decades.
Yeah. I think it's also the power of exposure, Like, if you follow Nkrumah's story, where he went to school, the jobs he did, where before even moving to Ghana, he had seen things and he had been treated in a certain way. He knew what
His counterparts had also seen
They have. You see, you're right. But here's the thing. There's a difference between, and this is where I think kids from privileged backgrounds have a disadvantage. And if anyone comes from a privileged background, you have to be intentional about your growth process. Otherwise, you're just living in the bubble. His counterparts probably came from privilege, right? They went to certain schools and stuff. They were used to certain life. For him, that was not his story. He didn't come from privilege, so he had opportunity to face different adversities at different junctures, and then also had an exposure, and also was able to like teach, and have all these things going on for him. And once you have the ability to see how the possibility of the future and what the future could look like, all you need, all you need then is just being at the right place at the right time. I think he was also lucky to be at the right place at the right time.
It's important to be at the right place. That's when all the ideas you have collide.
Yeah, that's what I call the God factor. I call the God factor.
Imagine being born 400 years earlier.
Yeah.
You and I wouldn't have been having this conversation. So,
Ghana's trajectory would have shifted in so many ways. So
it was amazing having you and just learning about your journey and everything. It was the conversation helped me put my mind to certain things. Impact investing is not a field where I am adept. I've always looked at it like unicorns. These people want to make a difference and that's good. I mean, I also believe you can make a difference in whichever way that you're given. But speaking to you both on and off camera has helped me think about so many other things in different ways. And I mean, that's the power of a conversation. It should be able to open up your mind into different avenues for you to also see things in different flows.
Yeah. I'll say my parting words to just young people. Again, I don't care about the older generation. Sorry, so if you're older. Well, the youth, 35 and below, right? The three things I want to leave with them is, one, you are young, right? Whatever it is that you want to do, just start it with what you have, where you are. That's all. You may make mistakes along the way. It is fine. You will learn from it. You pick it up. Just keep moving. The other thing too is, if you're afraid, do it afraid. Don't say because I'm afraid to fail, I'm going to stop. Yes, I acknowledge the fact that I'm afraid. I acknowledge the fact that I may fail in this, but I'm going to do it anyways. Just go for it. The third one, which I probably think is probably the most important aspects of all this, is know yourself, be self-assured, don't try to please everybody. Find maybe 5 people around you who you respect and they respect you. Respect their opinions, take their advice and run with it. Everything else is noise. Focus on the music and quiet the noise. If you can do these 3 things, majority of the time you see yourself on the successful side and not the other side.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I enjoyed this as well. Thanks, guys.